To the moon!
Don't worry, guys. With this first question, we're not going to get political or anything. But Mike, what did Trump say something about going back to the moon? I don't keep up.
Yeah.
Wow.
Donald Trump is apparently all about going back to the moon, saying that he wants to go back. But his pick to be administrator of NASA apparently doesn't agree with him.
Really? He doesn't want to go back, or they can't?
Well, NASA's been working on this Prospector rover mission, and the scientists have been working on all the details surrounding the launch and developing this rover. I guess it was going to be similar to like the Mars rover, what we've got going on Mars, and it was going to tool around on the moon and give us data back. So this has been scheduled to go on, but the administrator that Trump had nominated, Jim Bridenstine, he was confirmed in April 19th, and by the end of the next week, he had already canceled this rover mission. And this isn't the first time something like this has happened. This has been going on since we stopped going to the moon. It seems like at least once a decade since then, it's come up like, hey, let's go back to the moon. And then something happens or gets postponed, and then we don't go.
I remember seeing some type of video with a NASA scientist and them using the excuse of that they don't have the technology anymore to do so. What they used as far as
how does that work?
I don't know. I was wondering if it was fake.
It's got to be, because I mean, to say we don't have the technology, we've got the technology in our phones. It's an established fact that the power that's in our phone is better than the computers used to get man on the moon.
That's insane. I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah. Have you seen the movie called Iron Sky?
No.
It's, for one, it's hilarious and you need to see it. But it's it's this movie that basically it's about the Nazis after World War II. All the remaining Nazis colonized the moon, and they're developing they're building their army to come back to Earth and take over at some point. So they're actually breeding on the moon. It's a whole way of life. They've got schools on the moon, and they're just creating this massive army, and eventually they're going to go back to Earth. And there's this astronaut that goes on the moon who's this black dude, and the Nazis see him and they freak out like, oh my God, it's a black guy. And he for some reason brought his cell phone with him on the moon. So the Nazis capture him. They get his phone, and they realize the technology on his phone is greater than any technology they had ever seen up to this point. And they still have all those, like the bank of computers that's going all along a wall, like those big old timey computers.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, oh my God, we've got more power in this little device than this entire room. And so they start using that to jumpstart their mission to go back to Earth. And meanwhile, they start experimenting on the black dude, and they turn him into a white guy with blonde hair.
Oh my God, what the hell?
It's fucking hilarious. And he's the action hero of the movie. And he's got to make it back to Earth to defeat the Nazis. It's fucking fantastic. You gotta see it.
Yeah, I might have to.
Everybody's got to see it. Every single buddy. It's awesome.
So what can you tell me about this company called Moon Express out of the Silicon Valley?
I know that they're a company that wants to go expressly to the moon, right? Right.
They want to make a train right to the moon.
Right to the moon. Next stop, the moon. All aboard.
Well, Moon Express is a company. They're a privately held company whose goal is to mine the moon for its natural resources. And they announced this year that they plan on opening up a mine that'll be running by 2020. And an interesting point that the plans that they have show that they're going to build this mining camp on the moon's south pole, and it's some 1,000 miles away from anywhere we've landed before, which is a little odd to me. And I don't know, that sounds cool.
What?
But is it?
Why is that odd to you?
I don't know why. Don't you want to land where you know there's not fucking giant dune monsters that are going to kill you?
Well, I think they're assuming that there's not giant dune monsters.
If there are any, they're going to.
I mean, you got to look at it in terms of exploration, though. Wouldn't you want to land somewhere where you haven't already charted and mapped?
How about halfway? I mean, if there are any giant sand monsters on the moon, they're going to be at the South Pole, I bet.
Why the South Pole?
I don't know. Isn't that like always the hidden place on all planets, the North and South Pole?
I want proof of that.
Well, it's all covered with ice, for Earth.
You're all covered with ice and Earth, fucker. I don't know. I don't think it's anything to be afraid of.
But yeah, it seems like a really cool idea, but I don't think I would. I didn't think I'd live enough. I didn't think I'd live long enough to where Earth would have to go off planet to mine for resources. That's some Weyland-Yutani shit.
Yeah, I don't think we're at that point yet, but it's always good to have a backup plan,
That's true. Do you think that's something, as the nearest inhabitants of the moon, that there should be like a vote on this, or?
What do you mean, like across countries? Well, I mean, they're really not doing anything right now that we know about. We'll touch on that a bit later, but I don't know. I don't think it's anything to panic about yet. I think it's more like, hey, let's check if there is stuff on the moon that can be mined, because you gotta look at it in terms of what the cost to do it, and even if it's something that's rare on Earth, if we know where it is, it's still going to be cheaper to mine that than it would be to mine on the moon. But it's always good to know what's up there. Just at least go take a peek around and see if there's anything worth their time.
That's true. And also having it operational by 2020, I mean, it's 2018. That's a little pushing it. Even if you have all the money to do it, it's going to take a lot longer to build the shit you're going to need.
Yeah. And I'm sure that the date of 2020, it just has a nice ring to it. By 2020, we're going to be up on the moon mining shit. It just seems like 2020 is one of those distant things. Like when we were kids in the year 2000, like, oh my God, I can't wait for the year 2000, flying cars and neon lights all over the place and techno music. And it was none of that. It was pretty much similar to when we were kids, except people look at their phones all the time.
The Moon Express fucked up by saying 2020 that they got 2 fucking years.
Well, they better get on that shit. But there's a lot of companies that are private companies that are doing things like looking to go to the moon or go in the moon's orbit. Like Virgin, the company Virgin, they're looking at space flights, to privatize space flights so that rich people can go fly up in space and look at all the prettiness. And then you got SpaceX, that I think they're more focused on Mars though, but still they're a private company. And Bigelow Aerospace, lots of private companies interested in space and doing God knows what in space. I mean, especially with Bigelow, with all this stuff that we know about Bigelow and Bigelow Aerospace, it's a little sketchy.
It is sketchy. I mean,
I think sketchy is the wrong word, because I don't want to say like it seems like not on the up and up or anything, but you gotta admit it's kind of curious. This guy who owns his own private space company bought the Skinwalker Ranch. He owns it. It's private. He funded the NIDS team going in. It's a little weird,
That is strange.
Am I wrong?
You are not, sir.
He wants giant immortal wolves, and he wants to go to space.
It is weird that these are all privatized companies. I mean, it sounds silly, but I don't know if I was the president or the government, and I get it, the government's full of lies and stuff for sure. I understand that. But there's got to be some type of laws in place where, like, I don't know, maybe accidentally starting an intergalactic war.
Yeah, but how could you can't say that when private contractors are the ones that build all of our weapons and military equipment. That's not the government. The government just funds it.
Yeah.
But it's all private companies that do that shit. So, why not space as well? And I guess technically NASA it's a publicly funded company rather than a government agency.
Mm-hmm.
But the government does provide funding for it.
I was going to ask a political question again, but I'll skip it.
Now let's politicize. Ask away.
Well, with the United States government being a gazillion dollars in debt, and they just spend and spend and spend what they want. There's no real limit to branches funding. I think anyway. Why don't our soldiers look like fucking stormtroopers?
Because they don't need to.
They should. I mean, they should have full body armor. They should shoot
they should
better.
Be invincible. Damn it.
Yeah. I mean, right after Iron Man came out, granted some of the stuff existed before, but you see all these companies start working on exoskeleton suits and shit like that. And by now, we should have a couple Iron Man suits somebody can hop into.
Who's to say we don't?
That's true, too. How cool would it be to be the pilot who gets to fuck with that thing?
Yeah. Maybe that's what's responsible for a lot of those flying man sightings.
Mystery solved.
It's really Iron Man. Iron Manning around. What do you think is scarier? The companies that are trying to privatize space exploration, or the companies that are trying to exploit the resources?
See, I think they're all trying to exploit the resources. I think the Virgin guy wants to get to Mars, or let's say he all of a sudden wants to go to the moon. I think he wants to get there to be able to claim something. These people with all this money, they can fly a fucking spaceship to the moon if they want. Let's say they do that and they set up a mining camp in their camp, and they're like, hey, you need these materials, I got it. I think it's all for money. I don't think it's in the name of exploration at all.
So you don't think any of it has to do with curiosity or wanting to find aliens or UFOs?
No, not at all. I think if we wanted to do that, the government would have been funding projects like that a long time ago and continue to have been doing that to this day. I mean, the low orbit flights that guy does or wants to do, I can understand that. But why is a group from the Silicon Valley, that's their sole purpose, is get to the moon?
Maybe they're just nerds and they just want to go.
Well, for all intents and purposes, we've been there.
I want to go to the moon, and I want to hang out. I want to see what it's all about. And because I'm a super smart nerd that also has a lot of funding, I'm going to go to the moon, God damn it. And then they do, or try to.
Yeah.
So you say that, according to the story, we've been to the moon. Do you think that we have actually gone to the moon?
I do. There's a lot of weird stuff as far as faking photos and stuff like that goes, but I think we've been. Maybe the information they released to us isn't 100% truthful, but I think we've had men on the moon.
Okay, then let me ask you this: do you think that Buzz Aldrin and Neal Armstrong were the first people on the moon?
No.
Interesting. Do you think it was us or some other civilization?
A little bit of both. I don't think the government would release stuff like that or broadcast that shit on TV unless they knew they were able to do it for sure.
Yeah, that is the weirdest thing, and especially getting like we had people go in orbit from the moon, but how did we know that we'd be able to get off the moon once we landed on it? And and to broadcast all of that live, it really makes me wonder if there wasn't somebody else there first. And we covered the conspiracy of the Russian cosmonauts, how there was supposedly a secret Russian space program where they sent a bunch of cosmonauts up and most of them were killed. And so it was kept quiet until they had a successful one, and then they announced the successful one. So I wouldn't say that's out of the realm of possibility for the US as well. And in fact, I wouldn't be surprised if just getting a person into space, we went through a lot of trials and people died as a result without anyone knowing.
Yeah, I can agree with that. we can just go down the rabbit hole and say they're going to broadcast all that shit live. I don't remember if they broadcasted landing and all that shit live. I'm sure there was a delay just because of how broadcasting worked, but what if they just got off the ship and skeleton monsters popped right out of the dirt and started stabbing everybody?
Skeleton monsters?
Yeah, like some rocky stone-made skeletons.
Man, that sounds awesome. That sounds really cool. I want that to be what happens now. I mean, not really, but man.
Just imagine how cool they'd be able to broadcast it. I mean, there'd be 1,000 websites streaming the helmet cams on the astronauts 24/7 if they went now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like a horror movie. They all have the cam helmets on, and then you see the skeleton monster come up out of the moon rock, and then that just goes to static.
Well, yeah. Imagine all the
one
days.
By one.
Imagine all the days of seeing things walking around the background that the astronaut doesn't see, and we're just like, look it, turn around.
Yeah, turn around, you son of a bitch. There's a rock monster behind you. Did you ever see that? What was it? Apollo 18 or something?
Yes, I did.
About with the moon rocks that were bugs or something.
Yeah, that was a weird one.
I wasn't really a fan. I wanted to like it so bad, but I was disappointed.
Me too. When it got to the rock stuff, I was like, really? Oh, man.
Yeah. Why couldn't it have been some cool monster? Why'd they have to be rock bugs? Lame.
They just don't want to be labeled as a monster movie.
So we're a rock bug movie instead.
Yep.
Way to go, guys. So there's a lot of ancient cultures that actually have, as part of their mythology, that there existed a time in our world where the moon wasn't there.
Really?
Which seems, yeah.
That's just as crazy as a dude coming back from the dead.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's weird. But there's been evidence that the moon could potentially be older than Earth itself. And just recently it was published by NASA that they found out that the moon is even older than we originally thought as well. But they said that they were off by like 4 million years or something. So it still exists after Earth was created. But there's certain people that are arguing that the moon might be older than Earth. And it's also interesting to note that the moon makes its orbit is almost a perfect circle. It's slightly elliptical, but it's as close to a circle that you can that exists in this solar system. Everything else has an elliptical orbit, and this is almost a circle.
Yeah, I think, what is it, 99.9% perfect?
Yeah, it's really close. I don't know the exact measurement, but it's very close.
I read an article that had a bunch of stuff to do with weird stuff on the moon. I'll put it in the show notes for you guys. But one of the things they talked about how the moon was too perfect, and that's one thing they mentioned. So the story that they give now is that the moon used to be a part of Earth, or it's just some rock that floated into the gravitational pull of the Earth?
I think there's a few different theories. I think one of them is that it was pulled out of our ocean by some sort of impact, and then our gravity created this sphere that eventually became the moon. I think that's typically the idea of moons, like especially from a rocky planet. I don't know so much about gas giants. That could just be the moons around gas giants. Could just be some space debris that got pulled into the orbit by the gravity of the planet. I think that's what they propose for that, and then they collide and bang together, and then eventually form a moon.
I also read that our moon is the biggest moon for any planet. Even like the gas giants, their moons are very, very tiny. And they started to freak out a little bit about their theories and talked about the moon being like a satellite or a base itself. What are your thoughts on that?
I actually like that idea. Especially, all right, so we can tie that in with like the ancient alien thing, really. If like I mentioned before, there's myths that the Earth, or that there was a time on Earth that the moon didn't exist. and that exists in different myths from across the world. So if, let's say that was the case, and then you've got also in mythology, we can, just because it's kind of cliche, I'm going to bring it up, but the Anunnaki, and how they're supposed to be these crazy alien overlords that basically made us into slaves to mine their gold. And then you got story in the Old Testament of God coming from the sky and angels coming from the sky, and the demons landed on Earth. And then you've got the stories in the old Hindu texts that reference the flying machines and weapons like nuclear bombs. And there's a lot of evidence in the Middle East of this nuclear, it's called nuclear glass. It's basically, it's what you find around the test sites in the deserts from when they were testing the nuclear bombs. And this is found all over the Middle East. Look at the most popular religions in the world: Judaism, Christianity, Islam, all take place in that region. All reference these things coming from the sky and destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, which again came from the sky. You've got the angels coming from the sky and fighting with the powers of the Antichrist during Revelation. I mean, any number of things. You've got Jesus being sucked up into the sky after he's raised from the dead. Mary gets raised or gets pulled up into the sky bodily. She was taken bodily into heaven. It's the Bible's filled with that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said in the Hindu text, they've got these references to these humongous bombs, which if those were real, it would have created the glass as well.
Now, what do you think about if there's some religions that speak of the moon not being in the sky? Is there any religions that talk about the creation of the moon?
I'm sure there are, but I'm not familiar with the myths of the moon, other than that they exist, that the moon was not there. But if there was a time on Earth that humans existed where the moon did not, maybe we can see so we also, another myth that we have across many cultures in the world is the flood myth. And we've been able to scientifically prove that at one point there was a period on Earth where it wasn't necessarily all over the world, like the entire world wasn't covered with water, but there was considerable flooding, and it changed coastlines and flooded places. What if that coincided with the appearance of the moon as well? Or maybe there was a flood that occurred earlier on in our history that wasn't referenced, and the flood that we've been able to prove scientifically that occurred later on. Because we know that the moon affects the tides, and it's due to gravity. So the tides would have been very different. The gravity of the moon would not have had an impact on it. But now we've got the moon here. So when the moon shows up, it affects all of this. It floods Atlantis. That was why Atlantis flooded. And they start sending down their people to different areas, and they start teaching things. And that's why you've got a lot of ancient cultures that have knowledge of these things that we had no idea existed until relatively recently. Like, for instance, the Dogon tribe, who knew about Sirius B, when we didn't even know about that until the 20th century. But that was part of their mythology, that the star Sirius was part of a binary star system, and there were two stars.
That's incredible. How the hell could they possibly know that?
Yeah, exactly. And how did other cultures know how many planets there were?
Ancient telescopes, bro.
Well, yeah, there's ancient telescopes, but we're talking like way before the advent, at least what we know of as telescopes.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got primitive cultures that know about this stuff, and we can see it on their paintings and artwork. So where else would it have come from if not the moon? The moon is the base for all aliens, damn it. That's why we can't find them on other planets, because they're not there, man. They're right on the moon. And we know that there's something fishy about the moon. Well, there's a few things that are weird that's unexplained. For one, we found elements and metal which is processed. Like we found brass on the moon. We've found uranium-236 and neptunium-237, which these two elements never have been known to occur naturally. Uranium-236 is basically the waste product that occurs after uranium is processed. And neptunium-237 is a radioactive metallic element, and it's a byproduct of nuclear reactors and the production of plutonium.
Yeah, I read that researching those two elements. That's incredible. Like you said, there's natural metals that are found. I mean, even brass is a mix of copper and zinc. And there's one that we've found called mica, which is made from aluminum silicate. And
shit.
And another one I don't want to pronounce, alkalis. And it is odd as those sound. Those are natural things that occur, here on Earth. But for these things like the neptunium, I mean, this is a byproduct of nuclear reactors. Why the fuck is that on the moon?
Because that's how they're building their nuclear arsenal.
Well, yeah. I mean, theoretically, neither of these should be found outside of a nuclear power plant or nuclear explosions.
That's where you're wrong, Mateo, because they're found on the moon, damn it.
See, again, it makes me believe that there's been people on the moon before the United States claimed to have.
Why would there be these byproducts and leftovers of nuclear reactors and plutonium development? Like, why would people be doing that on the moon?
Maybe that's why we haven't gone back. There was like some catastrophe with a nuclear power plant they tried to build there, and they've just been waiting for the radiation to die down.
Interesting.
I mean, if we were going to go that way, maybe like the old sailors talked about how rough the seas were. Maybe there was no moon. The seas were just wild, and putting the moon in place.
We needed the moon to bitch slap the ocean.
Yeah, maybe that was.
Listen here, I'm here to regulate.
Maybe that was just a way to keep the human race from exploring the Earth. Who knows? Maybe the Illuminatis were fucking cavemen.
Maybe the moon's alive. But it is. I mean, all right. So I'm pretty sure we talked about this on the last time we talked about the moon. But Sergeant Wolf, do you recall his story?
No, refresh my memory.
All right. So Sergeant Wolf was in the Air Force, and he was a technician who worked on photography equipment. And they had one of the machines go down in the processing area. They're getting these satellite pictures from the moon. And he got called in to work on this machine. And while he was working on it, one of the guards on duty called him over, and he's like, "Hey, we're not supposed to tell anyone about this, but check this out." And he showed him pictures of this military base. And he wasn't able to really distinguish what the landscape was, but he said he saw Quonset huts and a few different buildings set up. And he was told that this picture came from a satellite that was orbiting the moon, and that this base was on the far side of the moon, and it was top secret. But the base is there, and we are still there on the moon, and we've established bases on the moon, and it's ours, not an alien base. So if there's going to be a base up there, then clearly they would need some form of they would need a power source. And if they're on the dark side of the moon, then they obviously couldn't use solar light, so they would have to use nuclear. So in developing a nuclear power plant, that's where these elements are showing up, is because they have to power this thing. But in all honesty, that story told to him seems like it could have been disinformation. Like, it just seems kind of convenient that the guys in charge would have they escorted him in, showed him where to work, and just left him with this guy with these photos. It seems kind of fishy. Like the guy was planted and like, "Hey, go tell him this information."
Yeah, no
kidding. And just seeing if they could, maybe they were vetting him to see if he was trustworthy or not.
Yeah, that is weird. Hey, come over here. Let me get court-martialed and maybe shot in the back of the head and thrown on my couch with an empty bottle of bourbon.
Yeah.
That is odd. That's some Dick Duty business.
Yeah, it is. But there is a lot of evidence that something strange is going on that we don't know about. And there's tons of videos online of that people take when they'll like videotape what they're seeing through their videotape. Listen to me, I'm like fucking 700 years old. Like, they videotaped it with the beta recorder. They broke out the old reel-to-reel and stuck it right up. They're able to record what they're seeing through their telescope. And this one guy I remember was recording the moon. It was a full moon. And over the horizon of the moon, you just start seeing these orbs come up just slightly above the moon's surface and then go across the moon.
I've seen a lot of those.
Yeah. What is that? You know, that can't be a natural phenomenon. And then there's the lunar transient phenomenon, which has been recorded since the 1100s. And at first it was thought to be maybe volcanic activity on the moon or meteor impacts, but they don't appear that if it was volcanic activity, it'd be a prolonged glow that would have lasted a while.
Mm-hmm.
If it was a meteor impact, it would have been an explosion. These lights, they just show up on the moon, and it's been observed by astronomers since the 1100s. It was observed by NASA during the Apollo 11 mission. They radioed in to Neal Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin and asked if they were able to see this light from orbit around the moon. And they also were able to observe the lights on the moon.
No, these are lights that are on the moon. They're not like glowing UFOs flying around.
Maybe it's a beacon. I don't know. We don't know what they are. They're just lights that appear on the moon.
That's so weird.
Maybe the moon is a base though, and maybe it's just like some light on the craft itself.
It's one of those blinking lights all airplanes have, so they don't crash into each other.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like, oh shit, let's test the old emergency lights. All right, cool, still works.
Well, we've talked a lot about weird pictures of Mars and how people say there's little death metal playing naked Nessies that are time travelers, and Obama's head. Remember that one?
Yeah.
I came across these photos that they're supposedly genuine NASA photos, and Russia's space satellites caught these images as well. But there's images and videos taken from NASA's Apollo missions and Russia's Zod 3 space probe that was launched in '65. But they reveal odd structures on the moon, so not just Mars. But some of the things that they show in these images, people claim that there's a tower that measures several miles high. There's a group of 8 obelisks that stand at around 15 stories high. And there's even appears what to be bridges. And in some of these photos, there's a lot of photos, and it's just the moon's terrain. You can look at 5 of them and 10, 15, 20, just start to get a feel of what the moon's surface looks like. And I emailed them too. I don't know if you got those, but
yeah,
there's this one where it looks like a huge factory. I mean, you'd have to fucking really explain this one to me, because it looks like a fucking man-made, maybe not man-made, but it looks like a structure. It's not part of the natural terrain. What did you think about those photos?
It definitely doesn't look like part of the natural terrain. There's right angles. It looks like it's something that was built. And if you look around it, it looks like there's pathways and smaller buildings and stairs and bridges and things like that. The thing is, I don't know if that's necessarily the moon. Now, I talked on a recent episode about Mars and how there was that one video that they were able to compare, and it was part of Egypt with a red filter over it. And NASA has also admitted that 100% of the pictures they get back from Mars are colored in some way. They either add a color filter over it or color certain things. And all of those pictures of really cool nebulas that are out there with all those cool colors and clouds and stuff, those are all artificially colored as well.
Why do they do that?
I don't know.
It's got to look cool.
Well, I think with the nebulas, they color it to distinguish between the different the different elements that are swirling around in there. So like, I don't know what the colors are, but just for instance, green would be nitrogen, yellow would be carbon, orange would be oxygen, you know, and they color it in that way, and then it looks all cool and majestic. But in reality, it doesn't look like that. It might just look like a hazy cloud for all we know. But I mean, if they're that meticulous that they don't release any Mars footage without it being colored, then I would have to say they're not going to be releasing things from the moon without at least checking it over. So this thing, I don't think was a mistake. I mean, yeah, it could have been. Everyone's, you know, no one's perfect, but it just seems like one of those things that just gets put out there, and it's not what it's purported to be. You know, maybe they were just taking pictures over a desert somewhere and just had this clump of pictures in there, and somebody was being lazy and like, all right, let's just put the black and white filter over it, make it look all grainy, and he just did it to all of them without really looking, and this thing ended up being part of that. Or maybe it's a factory on the moon.
Yeah, I don't know. There's too many straight angles. I mean, there's nothing that looks like it in the other photos at all, or any fucking photos of the moon that I've ever seen.
But there's a theory that because a question a lot of people ask is, why haven't we been back? And then a lot of the time that's followed up with the fact that there's aliens on the moon that warned us that we're not welcome there and we can't go back, which is why every time we've showed up on the moon after the first mission, it was just kind of like a swoop in, take some pictures, swoop out of there. And then we just stopped going. But there's a theory that we just stopped publicly going, and that we've still been sending people up there, and there's a base up there, and that there's a secret space program that nobody knows about. And maybe that's what all those weird rockets are that have been flying over California and out west in Texas, and, you know, all those weird looking rocket videos.
Yeah, with so many private companies doing this type of shit, I mean, that's great for the government. It's just deniability.
Yeah, and it's not us. It must have been a SpaceX launch, or, you know, they could come up with anything really. But they twice now. The first time this happened was September 10th, 2001. And Donald Rumsfeld came on TV and said that there was $6 trillion that was missing from the budget.
Yeah.
And they have no idea what happened to it. This is the defense military budget. No idea what happened. $6 trillion. Like, what could that have gone towards?
Yeah, how do you lose that much money? I mean,
that's like, nobody could spend that amount of money in a lifetime. No, you know, and that's missing. Where did it go? That had to have gone to something massive. And then again in 2008, I believe, there was another $6 trillion that went missing.
Damn.
So that's $12 trillion in less than a decade that has turned up missing. And nobody knows where it went. And if they do know, they're not telling.
Yeah, I don't think the government loses that type of money. I mean, sure, there's a couple zeros written in the wrong place, not enough zeros written in the other. That can happen, but not that much money. I don't think the government would be that sloppy. What do you think that money went to?
It could be a secret space program. I mean, so really think about it. If we have a colony, or not even a colony, let's say it's a scientific outpost, let's say it's a lab, I don't know. If we have something on the moon, and let's say it's the US. The US is on the moon. There's no other country that's on the moon. No other country other than the US has had a man walk on the moon. Like, think about that. That's crazy.
It is. And that's kind of one of the questions that pop into my head when I think about why we haven't been back. I always go to that we were told not to go back. And that's usually met with a couple chuckles and stuff like that. Mm. But we were talking about presidents making deals with aliens.
Right.
You know, we don't laugh at that too much. It's more interesting and fucking probably what happened, but
yeah,
maybe we were told not to go back.
Then where did the money go?
I don't know. Maybe they're just paying other countries to do it, or maybe it's not just the U.S. behind this military base. But I don't know. Maybe shouldn't 12 trillion be enough?
Well, let's look back at some other conspiracy theories surrounding the agreements between aliens. We know about the Eisenhower thing, but then there's the Dulce base, which is alleged to have levels where humans and aliens work together. And there's been other bases that are supposed to have, like Area 51. There's supposed to be aliens on base at Area 51 as well. And so if we've got them working together on Earth, if we made it to the moon, then what's not to say we're working together on the moon as well? You know, maybe we got up there, we found out what the moon was. Because there's the story of from Buzz Aldrin and Neal Armstrong that they were being watched the entire time they were on the moon by these craft.
Yeah, I've heard the audio of that, and they sound so concerned, and
yeah,
it's very moving audio.
Yeah, and that could have been, well, I mean, we both said that we believe that there were people that went before the Apollo 11 mission in secret, but so let's say they were the precursors. They had previously set up this mission, and so whatever beings are already on the moon knew that this mission was taking place and were expecting them. So they were observing everything that was going on, but smart enough to stay out of the camera, or maybe the astronauts were instructed not to film them. And since then, we've been sending people up, and maybe when the astronauts are going up, it's not just for science. Maybe they're bringing some supplies up with them when they go and leaving the supplies. And then because there's already people or beings on the planet, they're leaving these supplies so that the beings can create something for humans for when they come up, kind of like a guest house, if you will.
Yeah, with all the probe launches and shit from every country, maybe those are just shooting off a little fucking care package towards the moon as it heads towards Mars.
Yeah. Well, and we can also talk about the lights and everything, and the nuclear fallout elements that have been viewed there, or that we know exist there. And if the moon is an artificial satellite, it's going to need some sort of power. So what if whatever is powering this, they're using nuclear energy to power it, and creating the plutonium and uranium and neptunium elements that are a byproduct of the process, and they're using that to power not only the moon but our outpost on the moon that's super secret.
And
maybe the music that was heard by the Apollo 10 astronauts was really like some sort of feedback from the process.
It could be. I came across a recording of the response of the astronauts hearing it.
Oh, nice.
Apollo 10 astronauts Gene Cernan and John Young heard what they described as, quote, strange whistling sounds that sounded like eerie outer space music.
See, strange whistling sounds. That could easily be feedback.
Yeah, you know what? It's in this recording, I don't hear the music. There's a lot of interference and feedback.
Yeah,
that's going on, and NASA explained that it was sound interference.
Yeah, because they were on the far side of the moon, so the moon was between the astronauts and Earth, so they weren't even able to make radio contact with Earth during that time. And after they heard the music, they kind of argued among themselves as to whether or not they were even going to report it.
Yeah, they were scared to damage their careers by saying, hey, we're hearing music over here. But there was a Apollo 11 astronaut, Michael Collins, wrote in his book that if he hadn't been warned about these weird sounds that happens, he said it would have scared the hell out of him.
So he had been warned beforehand?
Yes, that he might hear these weird sounds when they're on the dark side of the moon.
Who warned him of it?
NASA.
Or was it? Oh, it was part of the briefing.
Uh-huh.
Oh man.
But let's take a listen to this recording. I don't hear the weird sound they're talking about. I just hear this, just shitty audio, like from crappy communications devices. Check this out.
Hey, when do we fire the helium tanks?
Not yet, babe.
You want some more brownies?
No.
First, a little hungry.
That music even sounds outer spacey, doesn't it? You hear that? That whistling sound?
Yeah.
Woo! Look at your... Yeah, it sounds like, outer space type music. Hey, Tom, is your insulation all burned off here on the front side of your window over here? Right?
Yeah.
Mine's all burned off. Heading out here, where are you, John?
So that's part of their recording of hearing that strange space music, but that was recorded in 1969 and it was classified until 2012. But I don't. All I hear is that loud.
Yeah, like the buzzing sound, like a loose wire on a microphone or something.
I wish we could have heard what they were hearing, but they did seem to be alerted to it. I don't know. I don't know why they would call it music if it wasn't music to them. I really wish I had a better recording of what the sound was.
Maybe it just wasn't coming up on their recording device. Maybe it was something that could only be heard with the human ear.
Very true. I do have to say, though, weird shit can happen with audio equipment. There's been so many cases where audio anomalies have happened here on this show that freaked us the fuck out because they were so weird. And who knows how that shit works in outer space.
Yeah. But I would have to think that, like, where were they hearing it through, Like, was it coming through their speakers or their receiver, rather? Or was it something that they were actually hearing, like, from outside?
Yeah. And it's quite a long time to keep something that's easily explained classified.
Yeah, it does seem very strange. Like, why not just release that and be like, oh, they were on the other side of the moon, they were getting interference, and it sounded weird.
So they heard on Apollo 10 and 11. I wonder how many times it was heard after that. If that's the type of interference that happens when you're on the dark side of the moon, shouldn't it happen every single time?
Maybe it did. Or maybe after Apollo 11, they figured out a way to block it.
That's a possibility. So what do you think about when people mention the moon being hollow?
Well, there is the whole thing, like it rings like a bell. Like
yeah.
But I don't know.
Yeah, I was reading up on it, and I guess in November of 1969, astronauts aboard the Apollo 12 crashed its lunar module into the moon to measure seismic activity. And the astronauts observed that the moon rang like a bell for close to an hour. In later Apollo missions, NASA decided to repeat that test, but this time they used a much heavier vehicle as a projectile. And this time the moon rang for 3 hours, and reverberations reached up to 20 miles deep into the moon's crust. And that's a little weird. And that's NASA information. This is not classified shit.
And that's very weird.
You ever walk up to like a pole or a big beam and slap it and you hear that weird space sound,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like a tuning fork.
Yeah, exactly. We have examples of that happening when you hit shit like that. That shit that's hollow. I don't know how they can explain that. And just nobody talks about it. You hear it once in a while and it sounds too goofy. I never really looked into it. It sounded silly.
Yeah, and if it was a space station, that would make sense, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Because you got to have a living space inside and hangars for all the UFOs and all that stuff.
It is alien rock, man. It is, as far as how foreign it is to us. We've only landed on the moon, I think, 6 times? And it's not a lot of time for exploration. But you'd think they'd they did. They conducted tests like that. It's just, those are some weird results.
What if the reason that the moon's surface is so like weird and spongy is because it's just a buildup of like space dust and space debris?
It's like a graveyard for the galaxy.
Well, no, just like, and as it has gone around the Earth, it just kind of collects dust, or not necessarily dust, but little crumbs here and there from meteors and things like that. And maybe that's why the craters on the moon are so shallow, because they just kind of fill in with dust. Or maybe, what if the craters on the moon weren't even from meteors? What if they were from space battles that the moon got in on its way to our solar system?
Yeah, that's one thing I've always noticed about the moon, is that it looks like it's been in 1,000 wars.
Yeah, and it even looks like it's got like a scar across it and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or maybe the moon is a living thing like Ego.
Yeah, and it's just an old war hero.
And we just can't see its beard because its beard is on the dark side.
Well, I hope they do go back to the moon, but in this day and age with how the media is and news in general.
Mateo, we're already there. We're still there. We're living there. We're probably farming there on the dark side of the moon.
Yeah. If they do go, I mean, I don't know how much of the shit they report back I'm going to believe, especially if it's a private company.
See, I would be more inclined to believe a private company than a government-funded company.
I think a private company will just be like, yep, there's a bunch of space diamonds. Start giving us your money and we'll go get them.
Either that or they get there and the aliens are like, yo, we don't have an agreement with you. We're slaughtering everybody.
Yeah, we're going to leave one of you alive, and you tell them, if you send one more fucking spaceship over here, we're attacking.
You're all fucked. Yeah. We'll crash the moon right into your Earth. And you know what? We'll survive because we've got miles of space crust to protect us.
Yeah. Life-saving space crust.
Yeah, gotta love it.
Thank you for listening to the Whatcast. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, iTunes, and YouTube. Enjoy the podcast. Get yourself a Whatcast t-shirt or a sticker pack. Who was that dude on that one episode? Try the links in Homie's page. All this and more can be found at www.thewhatcasters.com. Thanks again for listening and have a great week.